The popularity of combat sports is on the rise once more, with insane moments ranging from the Conor McGregor leg break to the constant successes of the Paul brothers making news and attracting more viewers. But since both mixed martial arts and boxing are activities that require the constant flow of adrenaline and testosterone, you won't be surprised to hear that some moments have gone way too far. So what are some of the most memorable moments when MMA contestants and boxers stepped over the line, and what about these moments made the perpetrators social pariahs? Well, whether you're a fighting fanatic or just want to know more about the craziest moments in combat sports history, you've come to the right place, as we're about to explore some of the times that fighters decided to take things way too far. So strap yourselves in and get ready for a bumpy ride, as things are about to get interesting. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any of the new videos we post. Number 1. A little bit of spanking on the side. To really understand the first moment on our list, we have to go back to 2003, which saw the highly anticipated championship fight between Randy Couture and Tito Ortiz take place. Although many eyes were on both fighters, considering how the light heavyweight title was up for grabs, the overall theme of the fight made it one that everyone had to weigh in on. For those of you who don't know, Couture has always been a paragon of virtue in the octagon, never resorting to the trash talking of his opponents. To a large extent, he represents what the MMA used to be, which makes sense when keeping in mind that he was far more advanced in years than Ortiz was. Tito wasn't just much younger though. He was a trash talker of note who loved nothing more than to run his mouth in an effort to psych out his opponents before things even got started. In other words, we had a high-intensity battle ahead of us when it came to UFC 44, with Ortiz even stating in a press conference that Couture would never be able to beat him on account of him being far too old to even walk straight. On the day of the fight though, fans of Couture were pretty impressed with the resolve that the fighter showed in the octagon. Knowing full well that he wouldn't be able to beat Ortiz when it came to speed, he used his experience in wrestling to take the arrogant youngling to the ground as many times as possible. With Ortiz looking to lose out on points, he decided that the time had come for him to do something spectacular, as he was only going to win via knockout or submission at that point. This caused him to roll with a low percentage submission move known as a knee bar, which was well within the defensible wheelhouse of Couture. This resulted in the wrestling adept Couture flipping Ortiz over and ensuring that Ortiz had absolutely nowhere left to go. With the match pretty much over, Couture then took things a step too far by reaching out and spanking Ortiz, whose butt was now high up in the air. Although still one of the most disrespectful moves ever shown in the history of MMA, both the crowd and commentators alike couldn't help but burst out into laughter at what Couture had done. Not only had old towered over new, the paragon of virtue had stooped down to Tito's level and embarrassed him pretty intensely in front of his screaming fans, who beforehand had done everything they could to trash talk Couture. It's still a moment still cited by fans who have no love for Ortiz as the time that the Huntington Beach bad boy finally got what was coming to him. Hungry for more than victory. This is nothing compared to one of the most infamous moments in boxing though, which took place between Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson back in June of 1997. Before anyone knew just how memorable this fight was going to be, it was already being labeled as the event of the century, with the hard-hitting Tyson going up against the defensive Holyfield for the WBA Heavyweight Championship purse. And considering how Tyson and Holyfield have actually fought just a few months earlier, with Holyfield coming out as the victorious underdog of the match, Tyson had some things to prove. The fight began with Holyfield dominating Tyson, winning the first 3 rounds no problem. But this wasn't without its controversy, as Tyson had been complaining about the headbutting of Holyfield for quite some time during the bout. Upon reviewing the tapes though, referee Mills Lane stated that the headbutts in question were unintentional and thus unpunishable. Then came the infamous moment that shocked the world. Clearly upset about the headbutting of the dominating Holyfield, Tyson began the 3rd round with a furious attack, putting his opponent on the back foot for a short while. But then Holyfield got Tyson in a clinch, which caused Tyson to turn and roll his head over his shoulder and bite Holyfield on the ear. After ripping a piece of cartilage from the ear and spitting it to the ground, Tyson was pushed away by Holyfield, who was now shrieking in pain. And as Holyfield turned to walk to his corner, Tyson pushed him from behind. After a massive delay and a check by ringside doctors, the referee decided to continue the anticipated match, as it would have been pretty anticlimactic to have this highly anticipated match end in a disqualification. As the match continued though, Tyson lashed out at Holyfield's left ear this time, but this time his bite only scarred the fighter's ear. The second bite was only discovered after the round had expired though, causing the match to be halted once more. This wasn't the end of the Tyson tirade though, with the fighter berating Holyfield and his trainer while they were still in their corner being checked for bite marks. At the point the referee decided that he had put up with far too much, disqualifying Tyson and causing security to surround Holyfield for protection. The Rousey refusal. Fans of MMA will know that the sport is very much one based on mutual respect, but as things have have developed over the years, fighters have discovered that more eyes are drawn to a bout when they have had fighting words with their opponents in pre-match interviews and conferences. We all love a little bit of showmanship after all, which is why many contenders have taken to trash-talking one another. Not only does this serve as a great buffer for a fight, it also serves to put opponents off their game if done really well. It's like how diving has become a part of football. In other words, more often than not, fighters play into the narrative that they dislike one another prior to a fight in an attempt to pull in more views. But once the bout has come to an end, everyone shakes hands and goes on their merry way. It's a strange way to show mutual respect, but it's most certainly there. That being said, contenders have on many occasions refused to shake the hand of their opponents when things go wrong. While this has come to be expected, Ronda Rousey went on to take things to the next level at UFC 168. To set the tone of this moment, we have to remember that Rousey's opponent, Miesha Tate, had been trash-talking both Ronda and her trainer Edmond Taverdian relentlessly in the months leading up to the fight. Not only had she referred to Rousey as nothing more than an overhyped fighter, she had also mentioned how a hack like Edmond could only be responsible for her poor form. So in true Rousey fashion, Ronda made sure that Miesha paid for her insolence. She absolutely dominated Tate in the bout, finishing her off with a perfectly executed third-round armbar. This left her standing victorious over her battered and bruised contender. With the fight finally over, Tate stood up and reached out to end things on a high note, but Rousey wasn't ready to forgive and forget. Rather than shaking Tate's hand, she turned away from her and celebrated with the training staff that Miesha had been attacking the months prior. On the topic of her disrespectful refusal, Ronda stated that Tate was only playing the role of a respectful sportswoman in that moment and would have never have shaken her hand if there were no cameras present. So much for mutual respect, right? Ending things with a taunt. Last but not least, we had to include at least one Jon Jones moment on this list, as he earned the name of the King of Disrespect for a reason. Easily considered by many to be the most hated villains in the history of the UFC, Jones found himself performing a number of shameless acts over the years. He was also caught doping twice despite this incredible talent of his, which fans of the sport just couldn't get behind. So when UFC 182 came around, fans were chomping at the bit to see him get knocked out by Cormier, and it looked like months of taunting had gotten to Cormier, who actually ended up shoving Jones during the pre-fight conference. But when it came to the actual fight, Jones dominated Cormier by using this anger against him. Knowing full well that he was ahead of his opponents on points though, he threw his hands up in celebration before the fight had even ended. And when the buzzer finally went off, he aimed a classic pro wrestling taunt at his foe in the form of a classic crotch chop. Being happy about a win is one thing, but since some believe that Cormier deserved the taunt, maybe it wasn't completely out of line. What do you think about these shameless moments? Be sure to let us know in the comment section down below.